Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Stein, the editor of Campaign US, and I am so excited to be here with you today on day one of Campaign Connect, our global virtual conference. We have a really full schedule of amazing speakers throughout the next 2 days. This panel is the Client Agency of the Future panel, and we have a really great discussion. We're going to dive into how this time of crisis around the pandemic has really bonded a lot of agencies and clients, because it's required new levels of trust and transparency than ever before. We're going to dive into all aspects of this, the hurdles of it, the challenges, the expectations on both sides. So that being said, let me introduce my panelists. We have Lindsay Pattinson, the Global Chief Client Officer of the WPP, and Vineet Mehra, the Global CMO of Walgreens Boots Alliance. Joining this panel, we were also supposed to have Brad Hiranaga from General Mills, the Chief Brand Officer. However, their headquarters are in Minneapolis, and due to the recent death of George Floyd, the killing, for those global who may not know, he's a Black man who was killed by a white police officer, and they decided that he could not speak on this panel due to that. That being said, before we dive into the amazing content we have today, it would be a disservice to not bring up the social injustice and the inequality that's been going on in America. There are protests in almost every city throughout the states. Some are peaceful, some are violent, and all of it is around the discrimination that's been taking place here. So with that, I would love to hear from Lindsay and Vineet around what their companies are doing right now. And I do acknowledge that it's early days and everyone is still, figuring out their response to these issues. But Lindsay, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for bringing it up. I think it would feel very tone deaf if we didn't talk about it. So nice to be on the call. I'm Lindsay from WPP. We had a team of leaders that met on Friday to discuss it, the issue of the injustice of the death of George Floyd, and actually very quickly decided what we needed to create was a safe place town hall, which happened yesterday, Monday, for our US colleagues to listen, to really understand how people were feeling. And that was very well received. I mean, people were saying, look, actually, you do need to check in. Don't worry about feeling clumsy. If you have Black colleagues, they will be feeling hurt right now. They'll be feeling indignity and injustice. So please make sure you check in. So listening and being empathetic, I think, was incredibly important, but that's not enough. It really is now turning to being more vocal. And actually AKQA, one of our fantastic agencies, released a film yesterday called Silence as Complicity, which is something we've shared. So we need to act. And actually I picked out a quote from the Safe Place yesterday, which said, brief pulses of outrage aren't enough. We need everyone to be committed, consistent, and persistent for this to work. And we can't go quiet while the news cycle stops. So certainly we are trying to work out how do we reach out and empower and enable and think about changing the system within WPP for our own colleagues. We have to put targets and systems in place. If I look at the UK, and there's some research coming out tomorrow because today is a blackout day, which shows that despite levels of noise and empathy and communities of action, actually less than 5% of senior execs in our industry are people of colour in the UK. And as a creative industry, we have a duty to reflect the society and the businesses and the customers that we are trying to talk to. And we can have a profound impact on culture. And one of the things I thought was incredibly impactful was yesterday, CBS Viacom pausing and literally blacking out it was 8 minutes, 46 seconds, which was the amount of time that the police officer knelt on George Floyd's neck, which was incredibly moving and powerful and gave everyone pause for thought. So we're still processing exactly what we need to do. We are listening, we're being empathetic, and we are moving now to action to put systems and targets in place to ensure there's no intolerance. There are some practical things we can do as an industry, so making sure we aren't placing media activity on anything that's funding racism, for example, and doubling down on our efforts to support initiatives like Unstereotype Alliance, which many of our clients support as well. So I think there's stuff we can do across the industry to make sure we are better reflecting society and having that positive impact on culture. And there's stuff you can do at a personal level. You can see I'm white, understanding what white privilege is and making sure you're expanding, you're reaching out to colleagues and you look outside maybe your direct circle of friends to ensure that you're taking a much wider lens to people.
Great answer. Vineet.
Yeah, look, I think Lindsay covered a lot of ground there. I think we're looking at this from few perspectives, and we also, as a leadership team, got together, and it was interesting. We had this quote that was kind of at the center of our conversations, and it was this idea by Edmund Burke, which was around the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, and that has been a guiding force for us. And so, as much as possible, while we're still processing it, both from a company standpoint, but honestly also from a personal standpoint. I mean, I personally have a 7-year-old son who was asking me questions, and I myself am processing. I'm trying to explain to him and, just those around us. It's a challenging time, but what I do know is that we have to take action. And, the first action, obviously, is I'm sure, and I know a lot of companies did this, and it's absolutely critical, is I think more and more businesses are being sought after for positive change more than government these days. I think there's a really critical role that businesses play. And so the first thing we did was we went public and absolutely denounced vocally anything to do with racism, bigotry, hatred, stereotyping in any form. And, the first thing we had to do was leverage our voice to say that we are in absolutely always denouncing anything to do with those areas. And then obviously you get into a little bit of crisis mode as well, right? We've got first and foremost communities. At Walgreens, we obviously have 9,500 community pharmacies. We're a deep part of a lot of communities. And you can imagine the first thing we've got to ensure is that access to medication and some of those essential services that we provide to communities is absolutely critical. And so we're doing things like, trying to keep the store open, even though it might be through adjusted hours. We're mobilizing actually mobile pharmacy units that we use in a lot of natural disaster areas when maybe stores get torn down or broken. We're kind of mobilizing a lot of those resources and moving our mobile pharmacy units to areas that absolutely need it right now. And then we've got, 300,000 store colleagues around the world, and we have to care for their safety, as well as those in our support office. So, we're starting with action, right? We are denouncing actively through our words everything that's happening. We're trying to ensure communities get the access to the essential medication and services that they need. And we're trying to support, as Lindsay said, listen and take care of all of our colleagues around the world that absolutely need our support right now. So important that we started this conversation from this front. And I'll share with you, in all of this, one story that crossed my desk yesterday, and just showing the critical role that a brand like ours, is playing in these communities. We actually, I think the first thing to remember is the vast, vast, vast majority of all of this is peaceful protest. And we actually had a nurse in Milwaukee who was engaging in peaceful protest, noticed his community Walgreens trying to be set on fire by those on the other side, the minority that were using violence as a means and looting as a means to gain attention for all the wrong reasons. And he actually came in to the store, wanted to protect his local Walgreens to ensure that access to medication was still there, and used whatever was around, Pepsi cans, Coke cans, water bottles, to get the fire out, and saved his local Walgreens. And so in all of this, it's important to keep an eye on the goodness of humanity and why people are doing this, and that the vast majority of this is peaceful protest for an absolutely systemic and critical cause. And these are some of the things that guide us, and sort of some of the actions we're taking as we continue to process and determine what we need to do next. Recognizing the role of business in society today is very different than it might have been, just 5 years ago.
That is a great example. I mean, I think what's so important about having you both on is, like, I agree, brands today need to be at the forefront, and agencies are, pushing the brands and making these decisions, not just for your own employees, but for consumers and for the world. So I definitely great examples on both fronts. So before we get into this, also for people who want to see more coverage of brands and agencies and how they are reacting, we have a lot of coverage today on Campaign US, campaignlove.com. So check that out. That has been one of our pillars around diversity and inclusion, and we, obviously are doing the best we can to cover some of those positive stories. So to dive into the reason why we are here, we have a lot to talk about with client agency relationships, and I know you guys have known each other for a good amount of time. So I want to just dive into the pandemic. We are in, I think, month 3 of sheltering in place. So what's been the biggest change in terms of agency-client relationships amid this pandemic? And Vinny, I'm going to pick on you and make you go first.
I think it goes without saying, and I'm sure a lot of the people engaged in this conference here will have felt the same. I mean, we have to break down all silos, right? We have to break down bureaucratic ways of working. Speed is essential, right? And this is way bigger than marketing and agency client relationships. This to me is about the customer. This is about society. This is about being an essential service like we are with Boots in the UK and Walgreens here in the US. And one of the things we've been working on together with Lindsay and the team at WPP is absolutely breaking down silos and moving faster than ever. So we've had to quickly pivot to launching home delivery service. We're working with Postmates. We're creating drive-through pickup of essentials. We've pivoted to doing COVID testing in our pharmacy sites. In Boots, we actually have pharmacists that are in furlough right now that are actually taking the equivalent of 911 calls in the UK to help people through some of these things. So our role as a business and a brand and the set of experiences we need to offer has had to move at lightning speed. Things that might have taken a year in the past, our amazing teams around the world are completing in weeks. And this is the kind of partnership that we've had to also forge with all of our partners and with our agency here, in this case, WPP as well. I mean, Lindsay, we have stories of, briefs that we've given you, and I think 3 days later, things are on air. Agencies that are in the network that historically we didn't even have a scope of work with are just coming within 3 days, delivering work to the customer. And so it's just what you're seeing, I think, is this seamless, frictionless access to the best assets of our partners to deliver on behalf of the communities in which we serve, and that's really been our focus. And it's been quite amazing to see kind of old conventions being broken very, very quickly. I'm sure, Lindsay, you have a point of view on that as well, and just to thank you for mobilizing so many of your resources.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I think we are having more conversations, deeper conversations, broader conversations through every single channel possible. Vinny and I, mainly WhatsApp, but also every other type of channel, I think, as well, whatever way you can get hold of someone. So I think actually more communication because of the need for speed. And I also think actually importantly, a higher degree perhaps than we've had before in a really good way of empathy, because actually whilst we're working at speed and running fast and breaking things, you're also always doing the personal check-in. And of course we're looking, really simplistically, we're looking into each other's homes the whole time, and we're aware of everyone's home life and, their family life and the pressures that they have. So I think more and more comms, conversational, empathetic, high levels of trust, because actually at that moment you just got to get your act together. Really fast decision making from clients, really super fast, and agencies, faster reaction times, turnaround of solutions. So an example, for Walgreens was, within 1 week being on air with a 2020, celebrating the graduates of 2020 with a fantastic collaboration with Bebe Rexha. I'm probably pronounced that wrong, I apologize. But actually tons of squad agile working, and that only works if you've got agency people working all hours who are happy, who are passionate about that work, who work, as Vineet said, in a frictionless, seamless way. No, it doesn't matter at all what agency they work with. It's just actually coming together on a brilliant project, and clients that are super fast and decisive and clear on their briefs. So I think it's broadly been a very good experience, and it's made us realize, some of that old stuff, the silos, bureaucracy was Vineet's work. God, I mean, what were we doing? Why do we ever have so many status meetings? They're the bane of my life. Why do people sit in status meetings and then report back on the status meeting, and then you have another status meeting? How about just getting some work done?
Do you think that that'll stick, that breaking down of the silos?
I was just gonna say, as you asked that, it has to, right? I mean, there is no option to go back, because while we're talking about COVID and a period of time right now, which hopefully we get through as soon as possible, the fact is the customer has changed as a result of this, right? I mean, 25% of adults in America now have done online grocery shopping. That is like 10 points of household penetration in that behavior that would have normally taken 10 years to go after. Telehealth services and how you interact with your doctor and primary care physician have totally changed. The role of business has totally transformed. So I really just don't think there's an option. I think the speed at which all of this kind of forced digital adoption, the kind of recessionary impact of 40 million people losing their jobs in a matter of weeks. I mean, while there's a short-term need here, I think none of us know what's on the other side of this. But what I do know is that working the same way will not allow us to meet our customers' needs, society needs, and our community's needs. And so there just is no choice. I think this has to be the new normal. The trick is, how do we make this structurally normal so that it becomes a sustainable normal? And that's what we've got to figure out in our relationships moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, when Mark Reed, our CEO, who Vineet knows well, and we talk about the amount of innovation in the last 10 weeks is, unsurpassed. And this will accelerate our strategy. And Mark's strategy is simplification. What any client wants is the best of WPP. Other brands are available, but they just want the best of any agency group that they work with. And they need that to be without silos. Nothing drives a client more mad than seeing people sort of showing up with badges or arguing over, arguing over a P&L or a revenue line when you haven't even won the business, when you're not even creating work that the client is happy with. So I think, Mark, I don't mean to be flippant about, it's a pandemic, so being flippant about a crisis, but a crisis does focus the mind. And actually, I know that Vineet has seen a massive acceleration within WBA of his agenda for mass personalization and investment in subsequent investments that you need to go along with that. So I think for both of us, we see it as a massive ramp up and opportunity and acceleration of what we know needs to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And before I dive into the next question, which, Lindsay, I know you mentioned the word collaboration, so I'm going to ask about that next. You also talked about empathy. Do you think that, empathetic feeling that will persist in the long run after COVID, whether it's the way you tell stories or the way you interact even with each other as a client and an agency? Because you're both, all facing the same things now.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it's maybe just reminded people, the whole crisis has reminded people to just be a bit more human. And it doesn't, I actually find, I used to travel a lot globally. And actually, I always found coming to America made me a slightly more, I would always take a moment when people say, how are you doing? Or how's your day? Actually, in America, people genuinely want you to reply. And actually, when I come back to the UK, I'll go to Pret a Manger and they'll say, hi, and I'll answer it properly and I'll ask them how they're now. So I actually have, I'm probably incredibly annoying to any store I go in, but actually just having that normal human interaction, of course you should start with that. And I also remember saying to people when they were, more junior people, when we were talking about clients and client relationships, I don't know why a client wouldn't become a good friend. If you have high levels of trust and respect, and you need to start with that, you can't just become someone's mate because you like them. In a client agency relation, you have to respect them and trust them, and then that builds up to liking them. There's no reason why a client wouldn't come to your wedding. I've had 2 weddings, so hopefully no more. And I had clients at both of them because they've become good friends.
Yeah, and I think, what we're noticing, and Vineet, you might have heard this from some of your agency partners, is, on our side, we hear a lot from the agencies how hard the brands can be and the CMOs can be on agencies at times, pre-COVID, and now there seems to be a little bit that's like died down because everyone is facing the same things and you're, working together for a common goal in a different way. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Look, I'm probably one of those hard CMOs on the agency. I'll admit that. But I think it's because we're under such unprecedented pressure as businesses, as frankly the holding companies, I think, are under unprecedented pressure also to change their model. And frankly, this is all in service of this is all in service of our customers. We have to be customer centric in everything we do. And if we let that be our guiding light and our urgency comes from there, that's going to be critical. But I will say, there's hard, and then there's sort of, which I don't think will change, because I just think that's the moment we're in our industry right now. I think our industry has changed more in the last 5 or 6 years than it did in the kind of 30 years prior to that, right? So I think this is going to be hard. But then I think there's also, how do you set up the relationship in a way that allows you to structurally and sustainably manage all those demands? I think where the breakdowns happen is when the structural systems that govern the agency-client relationship are not set up to manage these new demands. And that's not bad intention, that's bad organizational design, frankly. And we know that some combination of human capital and organizational design to get through these moments. And I actually think that's the systemic challenge that's going to be facing our industry over the next few years, is how do we set up ourselves in partnership to meet sort of unprecedented demands on all of us as we move forward with all of our models being challenged.
So speaking of the models, right, there's a bit of an elephant in the room. So we're just going to bring that to the surface. So Walgreens Boots Alliance is right now undergoing a very big global review. So that being said, you guys are obviously all trying to figure out your own agency model too, and WPP is one of your partners. So going off of that a little bit, tell us about that agency-client collaboration, and what do clients not want to be a part of when it comes to the collaboration? What do they want to be a part of? Like, what are you like, leave me out of this?
Yeah, and I think, Lindsay, you were going to say something. I just want to make sure your thoughts.
I want to hear your answer. Then I'll give you my my answer.
Yeah, look, I think first, the first testament is that we're all doing this together, right? So we're in an RFP, and Lindsay and I are here very openly just discussing the future of agency-client relationships. And I actually think this is sort of symbolic of what it is. It's about communication, right? It's about being open. It's about being transparent. And so first and foremost, in some small, tiny little way, I hope that the fact that there is an elephant in the room while Lindsay and I are having this conversation is emblematic of the kind of client we want to be, and also the kind of partner WPP wants to be. And it would have been really easy to just avoid this and say, yeah, this is not the right time, but here we are. I think Lindsay, to answer your question specifically, like, look, it's actually not that, it's not that hard in words, it's hard in actions. The first thing I don't want to be a part of is I want zero to do with individual people's bonuses in an agency, in terms of like how one agency is getting the profit for their P&L, but another one isn't. It doesn't really matter to me. I just want the best of that partnership. I don't want to be part of the talent issues that are facing our industry in terms of like, how do we get this, Lindsay's heard me say this 100 times, unicorn talent, which needs to be everywhere in industry. And by unicorn talent, I mean data experts, technology sort of automation experts, and creative, right? These three things need to come together, no longer just in specialist fringe functions that get plugged into traditional models, but they now need to form, these unicorn talent folks now need to form the center of these relationships. And so I think the days of like account managers and strategic planners and, as sort of controversial as that may sound, and while they may have a role, that can't form the nucleus of an organization anymore. It now needs to be this unicorn talents at center. So, what I don't want to be a part of is sort of agents, helping the agencies identify what great marketing talent looks like, right? I mean, if you look at the holding companies in total, they are the largest recruiters of marketing talent on the planet, right? And therefore should be building the future pipeline of what this talent is. And so that's probably the second piece. And I'd say the third piece is, and I think Lindsay said this, and I would fully agree, is I just don't want to be part of the over processing and over engineering and like when a scorecard takes you, 5 times longer to analyze than it does to sort of discuss and take action on, something's wrong with it. And so I think there's just such systemic issues that we just have to overcome that, I know Lindsay doesn't want to be a part of either. It's just something we all have to work together on in industry. And a big reason we're doing the RFP is it's not really a comment on WPP. WPP has some of the best assets in the industry. It's a comment on, can we go out in the world and invent the modern agency client relationship? And that's what's at the very core of this. The last thing I'll share as well, I've talked about all those things, is the last thing that needs to happen, but it's critical to our strategy, is data has to be at the center of relationships. And data and creativity to me are not separate things. And, as we go into a world of sort of first party data, cookies going away, how do we work in clean rooms with our data seamlessly with our marketing partners? How are, holding companies adjusting to a world where the outcome isn't just a great ad, but it's, first party data driven strategy that then needs to kind of get matched and programmatically connected to customers. Now we need millions of pieces of content, not 2, right? So there's this whole machinery also that needs to be rebuilt and restacked. So I think we're in this moment, and that's a lot of why we're out in the market, is to help design that for the future.
Fair.
I think Vinny and I obviously speak on this often, so I think we're in vigorous agreement. And essentially, there's an ecosystem where first-party data has to be, the value of first-party data has to be realized, it has to be connected, it has to be analyzed, it has to have insight. You then apply machine learning, and then you need a distribution system across multiple platforms with a way of you then learning the lessons of all of that activity, the content that's influenced by, and the panels, the channels and the paths that you choose to come back in. So it's just a virtual ecosystem. So it's actually organic. It sounds rigid, but some people, you might be calling it operating system, or you want to look at your MarTech is an enabler of an ecosystem of content and distribution that you want to make personalized, because if you can personalize communications, you're going to be able to engage. Engagement and attention and trust are the new currencies for consumers. So how do you best engage? How do you earn their trust? How do you deserve their attention? You do a lot of that by understanding them and by talking to them in the right way. And you get, effectively, I had a lovely quote by another client talk about, you get the dividend of loyalty. That's what you get. That's ultimately what Vineet wants and needs. And Walgreens and Boots have some of the best first-party data assets in the world. That's why he joined the company. So you need that ecosystem operationalizing. Again, sounds rigid and rational, and there's an element of that, but actually it's organic. And then you need the right talent to be passionate, to partner with the client, as one team. So again, whilst there should be no silos within any kind of different types of agencies working with a client, you want the client and agency to feel like they're just all in it together.
So I mean, the bottom line of this, Lindsay, is we got to get rid of these siloed P&Ls. We've got to transform the talent, and then we've got to build entirely new machinery to intake first-party data and automate marketing, right, while keeping that human touch and kindness as part of it. And that's no easy task. This is a complete ground-up reinvention of the partnership.
Oh, well, you can use that in your presentation for this RFP. All the stuff we're learning right here. So taking that data piece, and then
competitors are also watching. That's the problem. Everyone will be quoting Vineet back himself. Too smart for that.
So taking the data piece and then taking that consumer loyalty piece, Walgreens Boots Alliance is very relentlessly focused on the consumer and that, human focused. So, and I know WPP with all of its clients is the same way. So what is the hardest thing about getting that journey right? Because, that is no easy task, as you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay said this earlier. Look, I think one thing not to forget in all of this talk about algorithms and automation and technology and data is that the fundamental job of marketing hasn't changed, which is to drive relevancy of our brand, which is a combination of experiences and the products that we offer. The difference is how you drive relevancy. And I think, you look at a lot of studies and, most consumers a few years from now will not even engage with brands who they don't feel are speaking to their specific and unique needs. And so I think at the very core of it, from a customer centricity standpoint, is while that goal hasn't changed, the way to get there is different. So for us, as Lindsay said, we've got 130 million loyalty profiles, right, between our Walgreens Balanced Rewards program and our Advantage Card program. How do we leverage that to give people in a highly personalized way the experiences, the content, the sort of everything that they need to get there in the right place? Now, everyone's talking about this, but the thing that a lot of companies and brands don't have is that first party data, right? Especially at our scale. And so for us, the biggest challenge is how do you do this at the scale? How do you do personalization at the scale we're trying to do it? And we've seen huge success in many of our experiments. For many of your CMOs and marketers in the call, you'll know that when a CFO finally recognizes your work in an investor call, you've made it, right? And last quarter, our CFO recognized our mass personalization efforts for driving 100 basis points of growth. So we know we're onto something. We now, to scale it, need to, and to maintain our customer centricity in a digital world, we need to figure out a way to take this huge asset that we have, actually put that all in one place, which we're doing through cloud migration and identity technology, and then be able to addressably get that out to, frankly, 100 million people at once. And this is just a machine that hasn't been built yet. And for us, that's how we're focused on bringing customer centricity into the 2020s. That's really our focus as a company right now.
Lindsay, what about you?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with. I just agree with everything Vineet said. I spent 2 hours having this conversation with some of my colleagues earlier today in terms of, the right clean room, cloud, safe environment. How that best works, which clients we're doing it really well for. So, I totally agree. And I guess as a comparative. At a WPP level, we're focused on, client satisfaction is our version of customer satisfaction. So actually it's interesting for us at a corporate level to think about how are we applying some of those principles to our own business as well, because actually we should have, and we do have, we have our own customer satisfaction survey. Some people, some of our clients have their own, but actually understanding the triggers, the signals, the needs of our clients, we have such a richness of data there, then that should help us keep ahead of the curve. And that's really everything Vineet is saying, from a Walgreens or Boots perspective. What you want is those signals and the understanding of how to personalize. And if we think about our clients as consumers or customers, you don't want to irritate people by contacting them too often, or you don't want to contact them with something you've already sold them. And the same principles broadly apply. So, I think it's interesting for agencies to consider the machines and the ecosystems that we're putting in place for our clients, for their businesses. Actually, it's helpful for us to look at those same principles ourselves.
Right. And to remember that creativity isn't dead in this model, right? Somehow now we have to apply creativity in the context of all of this. It's not gone. It just needs to be reapplied. In fact, it's more important than ever because in many ways, algorithms kill creativity. So how do you maintain creativity in a world of algorithms, right? And I think that's, again, another systemic thing facing all of us that we have to figure out.
Yep. Yeah, which is why you need to balance the ecosystem and that passionate talent. And the talent does different things. It can do different things, but creativity of the future, I'm sure we'll all cover, and I hope will be a big topic for a virtual Cannes this year.
100%. And both of you have said it's no easy feat. The personalization at scale conversation we've had a million times also with CMOs trying to figure that out. And then Lindsay, you said, people don't want to be targeted again and again with the same ad, that contextual targeting conversation. And Vineet, to your point, it is about creativity. You need to be creative in how you're targeting. I want to before we jump into some audience questions, because I know we're about to soon, I did want to talk about just about the future of client centricity a little bit. So if one of you wants to jump off on that for a few minutes, and then I'll see what the audience wants to ask you guys as well.
I mean, I'll talk, briefly. I think it sounds contradictory, but I think what a client like Vineet wants, I'll put words into his mouth. They sound like contradictory words, but I think I'm kind of championing the word dependable or dependability. I think it's an underused word, but actually knowing you can absolutely trust and depend on an agency to have your back, to know what you're trying to achieve, to do everything within their powers to make it possible means you truly depend on them. And if you don't have that, if you don't depend, you don't have the levels of trust, then you can't create work that's interesting. And then the other D, which sounds the opposite of dependable, is actually a level of discomfort. Again, every client is different, but there are clients, clients like Vineet in particular, who want a level of discomfort. They want to be challenged. They want curious people. They want to be pushed. They want to be led. And I think actually thinking about those two Ds is interesting.
I love that. Yeah, we need that risk taking. So, Vineet, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Lindsay is saying. She's awesome at these acronyms, which I have always appreciated, which is great. I think the other part is just around, I think the truth is we talk about personalization at scale and all these things, but the truth is, I'm sure in Lindsay's seat, like there is in this complex world of marketing nowadays or experiences, there is I can't think of clients in Lindsay's world, and I'm kind of trying to put myself in her seat, which are the same, right? I mean, there's no client that has the same first party data assets. There is no client, right? You've got DTC companies that do great. I came from that world, right? That do great personalization, but it's at a much smaller scale. They're not, you're not Walgreens, right? Or Boots catering to every person in America and the UK. So, others have third party data sets, but they still have the same ambition. So I think the real challenge here is in a modern marketing world, the assets required will be at different parts on that scale, right? And as you go down the list of what makes a modern marketing machine. And I think it's about meeting now. I don't think there's a template, right? I think it's now going to be meeting clients where they are. And that's the honest truth. There's customization that's going to hurt margin and things like that. That makes it difficult. But I do genuinely think that that's the world we're entering now, where there's no client that's the same. There's no, even in an industry, we'll all be very different in our access to data, what we provide, the technology we have, because these are all the things you're going to need in a modern marketing context.
So speaking of the modern marketer, we actually have an interesting question here from the audience. Somebody's asking, when it comes to a personal career point of view, how important is it to have the experience on both the client and the agency side if you want to have that strong agency-client relationship? Do you think it's necessary to have both?
I'll go. I mean, I on the client side, I think, again, I'll go back to that word that might be overused. I think what it gave me was a huge amount of empathy for what the client has to do. Otherwise, you're seeing it only from one side, and actually understanding the pressures that a client is under internally to sell through their vision, their ideas, in what can sometimes be seen as a cost rather than an investment, or seems soft or worse, kind of fluffy. So actually understanding how to help build the business case and create a framework and put it in the language of business, I think is very useful for agency people to have been on a client side.
Yeah, if I may, I'll answer the question slightly differently. I actually don't know if even that's the right question, right? It almost feels like an old-fashioned question in a modern marketing context, because if I'm honest, I think it's, as I talk, you'll keep hearing me talk about this unicorn talent where, literally my day before this meeting, this conference we're having now, I was with our data architecture team. Then I was with my CIO. And then I was in a creative review around what we're going to do around a campaign we're doing in the holidays in the UK. And so that's the world. And so rather than looking agency client, because I actually think you can get these experiences in different places, I think it's, are people building their toolbox of modern marketing, right? Because you could go client and do the exact, have this, not really build your skills beyond getting another perspective if you were on the agency side, right? So I would encourage folks to sort of go, what is the shape of a modern marketer, and how do I get those experiences? And frankly, in many cases, going agency or kind of, let's say, on the other side for data might actually be the best thing to do, because that's probably where the strength lies right now. But in other cases where you're actually implementing technology and you want to go on the client side because you need to live through the pain of change management and what that's like. So I would argue it's more about managing a modern marketing career path. And then I think agency or client, it really depends on the muscle you're trying to build. And I think that's what'll really drive it. So I really encourage folks that the old rule books of building a marketing career, I think, are really, they're tough. I personally took 2 demotions, 2 pay cuts on my way to where I am today. And, even I have a lot to learn as well. Like, there's just no way to get it all. So that's what I would really suggest, is build your experience set across all these modern marketing skills, so you know enough to be dangerous across all of them.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Sorry, I was going to add to that, be curious, put your hand up. Don't be afraid of asking kind of the stupid question, but after a while you need to go and find out enough so that you're not asking the daft question. And actually, we're lucky because in many client organizations, like Vineet's, or in a company like WPP or others, there's such a breadth of capabilities. If you want to start out as an intern, account exec, account manager, supervisor, that's not a great career path in a traditional agency. You should have the assets and the wherewithal to go and look across. And I think we're lucky as well. Not only can you read voraciously, so Campaign and elsewhere, we have amazing podcasts in our industry that tackle really interesting and difficult challenges. So, the likes of Scott Galloway or Kara Swisher. So you don't have to read, you can just listen and feel enthused and educated.
So being mindful of the time, we only have about 2 minutes, but I do think it'd be really useful for our audience if you guys could quickly just describe, to end this, what your biggest learning throughout COVID has been around agency-client relationships. A brief learning.
Nodding. Just forget rules. Just roll your sleeves up, throw yourself in, think differently, because that old world is not coming back. So have difficult, challenging, interesting conversations, and work at speed, because you'll still create brilliant work without opening on a beach in Hawaii.
Yeah, my sort of thing, just to coin something that I heard from someone else, is this idea of, for instance, Lindsay and I have a lot of trust with each other. And I think the reason we got some of this done so quickly is my learning is working at the speed of trust, right? And I think this is the moment that you'll find out, what those relationships are made of. So I think build that trust, and then you can work at the speed of that trust. And I really think that's got to be everyone's focus with their partners, whether it's client.
Very good.
Well, build that trust and throw away the rule book. I think that's a great way to end this session. But thank you so much for being with us today and sharing such wonderful answers and insights. And thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of the content to come on Campaign Connect today.